In this series, I'm painting 10 Space Marine intercessors from 10 randomly chosen legions in 10 randomly chosen styles. This time... Alright. And the style I'm going to be painting my Imperial Fist in is going to be... So this video is quite a bit late, and that's because I made a Bio Titan, which is sort of an ongoing project. The work is probably going to continue on that for the next 18 years, at least. And so while these videos are back, they're probably not going to be every month. Hobby time is very limited right now. That also means that I'm recapping a project that I did quite a bit of work on over the past several months. I've changed a lot of nappies since I began this project, and so my memory's a little hazy. It's going to be fewer details than normal in this one. Anyway, I wanted to create the iconic 90s retro hammer look, sort of the second edition of 40k. And there's a specific reference post that I found here for an Imperial Fist Force, which is pretty low res, and I actually didn't end up using a lot of the specific paints from it, but it gave me a pretty clear idea of the style. Lots of gradients, yellow sliding into orange and reds, and then some extreme highlights on most edges, sort of based on the geometry in basically bright white, and of course you've got to have a green rim on this. You've got to have a green base with sand and dry brushed, a yellowy green. I don't make the rules. So with all that in mind, I assembled an intercessor and did so trying to get as close as I could to the classic monopose kits of that era, which is not the easiest thing to do with the intercessor kit, but I didn't end up having to snip any bits. I just sort of accepted that this was as good as it was going to get, and then I primed it in white. Now in order to get the gradients, I sort of had two options. I could either start with yellow and then glaze in all of the gradients, or I could glaze in those gradients and then hit it with yellow. And that second option sounded more interesting to me, so that's what I went for. And I don't know, it's kind of 6 of one and half a dozen the other, probably. But what I started by doing was trying to glaze in those highlights on the shin pads and the other areas with red ink, very, very diluted red ink, and it was just too harsh. I couldn't control the sort of tea staining, so I ended up abandoning that, and I moved over to glazing with very diluted Mephiston red. So this stage of the project was basically just a couple of days of glazing practice, looking at the box art and trying to match those gradients on the shin pads and on the other areas, but also updating it because the geometry of a Mark 10 set of armor is completely different to the Mark 7, and I'm not perfectly happy with how it came out. I think if I had a bit more time, I could have done it a lot better. I could have got those gradients smoother, as I learned to do over the shoulder pads. I was doing 2 brush glazing, so I was using one brush to apply the paint and then another wet clean brush to wick it away from the top, so you ended up with these lovely smooth gradients. I started this having been a bit out of practice. I hadn't painted for quite a while when I started this, so as I went on I got better, and I kind of cringe looking at some of the early gradients I did, but it's fine, it kind of works. With that done, I then hit it with yellow through the airbrush, not Imperial Fist, but actually Bad Moon's yellow, because that's what I had. And the result isn't perfect, but I think it works pretty well. I think given the time I had, it's about as best as I could hope for. It's certainly very vibrant. I don't necessarily know if it comes across on camera, but the boy glows. One thing that I would definitely like to change if I did this again was just push the gradients further, especially on the front of the model. The back, I think, works a lot better because there's more, the gradients are more extreme. On the front, and specifically there's one thing on his hand that I wish I just pushed it a bit further. I don't think it quite gets the effect I was after. I needed to push it a bit more. But after that, I locked in all of that with some varnish and then went over with some highlights on the raised edges. So originally yellow with white ink, and then I think there was an extreme highlight of just pure white, and then moved on to the reds. So the reds I think were undercoated in Wazdaka red, and then I did the old trick, which we don't really need to do anymore, but I felt like doing anyway, which was highlighting the reds using yellow and then going over that yellow with a red ink. I think I used a Bal Red contrast paint to get the most vibrant highlights possible, which I actually kind of think works. Again, this project is a me being rusty and being mostly happy with the results, but could be could be better. Everything else was pretty standard, classic true metallic metals, you know, your bolt gun, well, it's not that anymore, what is it? Lead belcher followed by Nuln Oil, and then a highlight of chainmail and mithril silver. I can't remember which specific modern paints I used. And the levers were base coated with Rhinox hide and highlighted, I think, with Mournfang brown, and then working up to Ungor flesh on the extreme edges. And a few more details such as the purity seal and the eye lenses were just done in what I consider my standard way, I guess. But with everything else done, it was just down to the base. And I didn't feel like this model quite felt retro hammery enough, especially from the front, until I got to the base. And until I was able to bring out the big guns. Courtesy of my friend John, the Return of the King, baby. Opening this pot, which I'd like to point out still has the White Dwarf sticker on the top, memories came flooding back. It was wonderful. It's exactly the way that I remember it. The coverage is wonderful, tastes exactly the same, and going over the whole base with it, giving it the dry brush over the top, going around the rim again, it just felt right. Thank you so much, John, for lending me this. Mwah, what a beautiful paint. But with that, the model was finished, and it's all right. Like I say, compared to the other models in this series, he's not my favourite, but I think he fulfills the brief, especially from the back, of really looking like that era of Space Marine. As a way of improving my painting technique, it was just, frankly, good practice in getting glazes done. You know, this model was largely just glazes, airbrush, highlight. Done. Like, the interesting thing about this is the armor, and I guess you could argue the reds. And I learned something from doing this, for sure. I also learned that I love doing bases like this. I think I have a mad plan in the back of my mind to do my Leviathan and Indomitus Marines in this era of Retro Hammer, but doing them as Ultramarines, and they've all got to have bases like this. Like the sand dry brushed to look like grass, neither looking like sand nor grass in the process. Oh, I love it. Love it. The other thing to mention is he looks so vibrant compared to all the other models in this series. Like this stand that I got 3D printed. He looks a little bit out of place compared to the others, which I love. While he's not my favourite, I learned some lessons, I gained some appreciation for that era of painting, and I am pretty happy with the result. Like, I look back at him on my shelf and I just kind of smile. And if that's not what this hobby's about, then I don't know what it is. But with that, that's this month's model painted, and the past several months' model painted. Now I've got to find out what I'm going to be painting next time. Next time, I'm going to be painting an Iron Hand. Never painted one of those before. I quite like black. Actually, I need to buy some more black paint. And the style I'm going to be painting that Iron Hand in is... Oh, okay. Right.